You're probably staring at a dozen pictures of workbenches online, wondering if you'll end up spending a good chunk of cash on something that ends up taking up space, wobbling when you try to lean on it, or just not holding the tools you actually need. I get that hesitation. You've got a garage that's already half filled. You've maybe had a cheap fold-down table that broke the first time you tried to lift a power tool, and you're not about to repeat that mistake. The big question is, does this Milwaukee mobile workbench actually solve those everyday frustrations, or is it another piece of metal that will collect dust? Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I spent a few days pulling together what the product promises, what the community of trade workers and hobbyists tend to look for in a bench, and then I imagined how it would sit in a typical weekend warrior's garage. The goal is to give you a realistic feel for whether it's a worthwhile investment for your own setup. First off, the thing that catches most people's eye about the Milwaukee 48228560 is the size. A 60-inch footprint with a wood top that actually gives you a flat, solid surface for drilling, sawing, or even laying out a piece of trim before you nail it. In a garage where you might have a wall-mounted rack and a couple of rolling tool chests, that kind of dedicated workspace can feel like a game changer. The wood surface isn't just a thin laminate. It's a full-grain panel that can take the pressure of a bench vise without sagging. I've seen people set up a small jig for cabinet doors on similar tops, and it holds up surprisingly well. The next piece of the puzzle is mobility. Those 5x2-inch casters are sized just right to roll the bench around a cluttered work area, but they're not so large that they become a tripping hazard. The ball bearing slides on the work surface allow the top to glide forward and backward smoothly, which is handy when you need to pull the bench close to a wall-mounted outlet or push it back to free up space. In real-world use, the slides can hold about 100 pounds, so you can comfortably load a drill press, a small router, or a stack of power tools without feeling like the bench is about to tip over. Now, let's talk durability. Milwaukee used 20-gauge steel for the frame, a step up from the thinner tubing you see on budget models. In a shop that sees the occasional bump from a drop toolbox, that extra steel thickness translates into a bench that stays square and level over time. It's not indestructible. You still want to avoid dragging heavy metal sheets across it, but you won't be hearing that annoying creak the first week you put a bag of screws on a cheap stand. Who should really consider buying this? If you're a homeowner who tackles a few projects a month, building a deck, installing shelves, or doing seasonal home maintenance, the bench gives you a reliable surface that you can move to wherever the work is happening. The adjustable shelves on the sides are a nice touch for keeping a drill, a handful of bits, or a measuring tape within arm's reach, and they slide out enough to accommodate larger items like a pipe cutter or a compact table saw. The fact that the shelves are adjustable means you can reconfigure the layout as your project changes, which is something you'll appreciate if you've ever tried to jam a large piece of lumber onto a fixed shelf. On the flip side, if you're a professional contractor who needs to move a 200-pound workbench from site to site, the 100-pound slide rating and the casters designed for indoor use might feel limiting. The bench is also 60 inches long, so it's a bit bulky for a small apartment or a cramped utility closet. If your primary need is a portable roll cage for a few hand tools, you might be better off with a smaller, lighter-weight cart. The Milwaukee unit shines when you have the space to let it sit and become a semi-permanent fixture, not when you need to tote it up a ladder every day. One practical strength that often gets glossed over in spec sheets is how the bench handles vibration. I've watched a few DIYers set up a small orbital sander on similar benches and noticed that the ball-bearing slides absorb much of the shake, keeping the top stable enough for accurate sanding. That stability can make a noticeable difference when you're trying to keep a cut straight or a finish smooth. The wood top also helps dampen noise compared to an all-metal surface, which is a subtle comfort if you have kids or neighbors close by. A couple of weaknesses are worth flagging before you click Add to Cart. First, the casters lock in place, but the lock isn't as robust as a heavy-duty brake you'd find on industrial carts. If you have an uneven concrete floor, the bench can still slide a little when you're pushing a heavy load, so you may